Lorenzo Ortiz, a Baptist pastor who oversees 5 migrant shelters in northern Mexico, was released from captivity after around 29 hours of his kidnap. What might have happened to him when he was held captive? What was the general feeling towards his release? How come he was released without any ransom collected from him? We're going to be answering all of these questions and more today, so stay tuned to the end of the video to learn everything that happened. Lorenzo Ortiz, whose migrant ministry receives monthly financial support from Fellowship Southwest, was taken along with 15 other captives from one of his shelters in Nuevo Laredo at 6 p.m. on June 6, 2022, by a cartel operating in the area. The cartel first requested $40,000 for his release. The kidnappers later dropped the ransom demand to $20,000. When the ordeal ended at about 11 p.m. the next evening, the cartel not only freed him uninjured and without demanding ransom money, but they also changed 2 cut tires on his van. Ortiz detailed the experience in a 45-minute taped teleconference with Cameron Vicre, Fellowship Southwest's Director of Communication and Development, and Elket Rodriguez, Cooperative Baptist's Fellowship Field Representative to migrants and communities along the U.S.-Mexico border. During the conversation, Ortiz said that his captors pressed him for the cost of each migrant family he helped in one of his shelters. Ortiz said, "I told them as a pastor, we do this for free." One of them said, "I can't believe that you have this amount of people and you're not charging anyone. No one does this for free. I'm gonna have you beaten." Ortiz asked his attackers to check his cell phone's contacts to see that his shelter's network is completely free and doesn't compete financially with the cartel. "I said, call them all, and if you find any migrant who said I extort them, you can pull the trigger." Ortiz's challenge wasn't just bravado. He had received advanced warning about his abduction from one of his 15 shelter residents, then being held by the same cartel, yet he still ventured to Nuevo Laredo from his home in nearby Laredo, Texas. He did so knowing other pastors had been executed by cartels. He explained, "We have a lot of families, and I have 4 shelters, and I never run from any cartel or from anybody. I know God is in control. He said his angel is going to be with us. He is going to protect us. He's going to defend us. So, I do believe that." Rodriguez said that the cartel owns the turf, and that the money it makes from moving migrants as part of its organized criminal enterprise. He said, "It's all a business to the cartel. They see humans as commodities." The cartel that abducted Ortiz wanted to determine if he was a rival taking business away from him. To demonstrate their custody of Ortiz, cartel members provided one of the shelters with a picture of his van with the tires cut. At that time, members of his family started getting in touch with authorities in Mexico and America. Ortiz's reputation and the respect that he received for his humanitarian efforts in northern Mexico have led to a swift response from the Mexican National Guard, as well as regional authorities and local law enforcement, which caught the cartel off guard. The cartel, whose dominance is predicated on creating terror in others, was terrified with a helicopter hovering overhead and armed military soldiers in the streets, Ortiz claimed. Even a rival cartel contacted to inform the kidnappers that they didn't know who they were holding and he needed to be freed after determining 3 years prior that Ortiz was not making money from his ministry to migrants. Ortiz claimed that knowing that Christians were praying for him made him feel at ease. The cartel was shaken. The cartel never felt so vulnerable. Rodriguez said in a phone conversation that he prayed for the same conclusion as in the narrative of Abram and Sarai in Egypt, from the moment that he discovered that Ortiz had been abducted. God severely plagued Pharaoh and his household in Genesis 12, and the Egyptian tyrant ordered the Hebrew couple to depart. He said, "That's exactly what happened. They knew Lorenzo had to have the favor of God." Ortiz was aware of the cartel activities in the area when he started serving migrants in Nuevo Laredo some years ago, although he acknowledged that he was a lamb among wolves at work. He remained confident that God was going to be there. Ortiz stated that he believed God allowed the kidnapping to test our faith, to test our hearts. Some of the migrants who were kidnapped from the shelter and held captive for a longer period of time than Ortiz revealed to him after their release how they prayed and they sang songs together while they were captive. He said, adding even the cartel was touched by the witness of faithful migrants. A cartel member saw all of the guys singing and praying, and when he saw that, he started crying. They arrived at the refuge where the other Christians rejoiced with them as the cartel released the migrants 5 at a time over the following few days. Ortiz promised that he would assist them in starting the political asylum application procedure in the following days. Ortiz confessed that he fears danger when serving migrants in Nuevo Laredo. we may pay a price. But he argued that in order to fulfill his mission, he has to satisfy the needs in the name of Christ and bring the light of God's love into shadowy areas. He said, "We're not supposed to run from the devil. The devil's supposed to run from us." Because the majority of Mexican cartels are familiar with Ortiz and his ministry, he also thought he would be released in 2 or 3 hours. However, this group's newcomer commander had other plans and sent pictures of the hostage along with a demand for $40,000 in ransom to Ortiz's family. However, it had the opposite effect, as the day after Ortiz was kidnapped, a massive military and law enforcement hunt for him was started by family calls to Mexican and American officials. The threats of beating stopped as a consequence, and the ransom demand was first lowered to $20,000, which Ortiz contributed to, before being completely abandoned. Ortiz said, "Now they feel for the first time that they are going to die, because there was a helicopter all around the city with Mexican soldiers and Marines, and those guys thought the soldiers were going to shoot them. When the boss saw what was happening, he knew I was not just a regular pastor." On June 3rd, at about 11 p.m., the cartel member in charge of Ortiz's release made an offer to mend 2 flat tires on the pastor's vehicle. The next day, the car was delivered with new tires, and the other 15 kidnapping victims were also freed. According to Ortiz, everything was continued as normal after that event. He said, "I do not believe we're supposed to run away and not do our jobs." According to Elket Rodriguez, a field representative for the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship working in cooperation with the Fellowship Southwest of the U.S.-Mexico border, what the cartel discovered about Ortiz that weekend was a well-known fact in both the United States and Mexico. Along with running a refuge for migrants in Mexico, Ortiz also collaborates closely with respite centers in Texas, where sponsors from all around the United States are linked with legitimate asylum applicants. He frequently collaborates with U.S. Customs and Border Protection, the Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, Fellowship Southwest, and other faith-based organizations in addition to these agencies' Mexican counterparts, helping migrants harmed by Title 42, which permits the U.S. government to swiftly expel asylum applicants and other migrants to Mexico where they suffer extortion and murder at the hands of cartels, make up a significant portion of Ortiz's ministry. Rodriguez said, "They're very well organized. They have a lot of control. This is all a business for the cartels. They see humans as commodities. So if you want to get across the U.S. and back, you got to pay a fee because they own the turf." The criminal organizations are especially wary of immigrants who can return to the United States under Title 42 through a different port of entry. Rodriguez said, "If there is any way that they think you're related to a rival cartel, you're gonna pay the price. And Customs and Border Patrol and the Department of Homeland Security know this. Still, they continually, each day, expel people to their deaths." The cartels also have a bad opinion of ministers, and anyone who attempts to help migrants overcome these obstacles, Rodriguez said, "Well, Pastor Lorenzo and the other border pastors are not asking for money for sheltering migrants, for transporting migrants, for protecting migrants and helping them logistically from a humanitarian perspective. That means, for the cartel, you're doing this in good faith from your own convictions, and you are not doing it to cut into their business. This still constitutes a risky type of ministry," he declared. "People like Lorenzo every day are putting their lives at risk, and all of the border pastors we help at Fellow Southwest and the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship, they are putting their lives out there. They're being exposed to a lot of dangers, especially with cartels precisely because of this policy, Title 42. And that brings us to the end of the video. You got any questions that we didn't answer in today's video? Let us know in the comment section below. And if you haven't done so already, make sure to subscribe to this channel so you don't miss any of our incredible videos. Keep an eye out for the next